In the bustling city of Ibadan, where the old ways still whispered through modern streets, there lived a girl named Adunni. She was the only child of Baba Tund and Mama Shade, two humble street vendors who sold roasted plantains and groundnuts at the busy Dugby market.
But Adunni?
She wanted nothing to do with her parents' simple life. At 23, Adunni worked as a receptionist at a fancy hotel in the city center. She wore expensive wigs bought on credit, carried designer bags she couldn't afford, and spoke with an accent she'd copied from American movies. When her friends asked about her family, she lied. She told them her father was a businessman and her mother was a teacher. Anything but the truth. The truth was shameful to her. The truth was that her parents woke up at 4 every morning to prepare their goods. The truth was that they had sold their small plot of land to pay for her education. The truth was that they still lived in a single room in Okadu, where the zinc roof leaked when it rained, and the walls were stained with years of struggle. Every month, Baba Tund and Mama Shade would visit Adunni at her rented apartment in Bodija, a better part of town. They would bring her foodstuff, money they had saved, and prayers for her success. But Adunni received them with irritation, not gratitude. "Why do you always come here?" she would snap at them. "My neighbors will see you. What will they think?" Mama Shade's eyes would fill with tears, but she would smile through the pain. "We are your parents," Adunni. "We only want to see you." "Parents?" Adunni would laugh bitterly. "Look at you. Look at how you dress. Look at your hands, stained with charcoal and oil. You embarrass me." Baba Tund would touch his wife's shoulder gently. "We will go now, Adunni. But remember, we love you." "Love?" Adunni would scoff. "If you loved me, you would have made something of yourselves. You would have given me a better life instead of this suffering." One Saturday afternoon, everything changed. Adunni was at the hotel reception when she saw them. Her parents, walking through the glass doors of the luxury hotel. Mama Shade wore her best Ankara wrapper and head tie, but it was faded from many washings. Baba Tund wore his only good shirt, the one with the slightly frayed collar. They carried a basket covered with a clean white cloth. Adunni's heart stopped. Her coworkers were there. Her manager was there. The wealthy guests were there. "Adunni," Mama Shade called out, her face bright with joy. "We brought you lunch. Your favorite, Yuta soup with pounded yam." The other receptionists turned to look. Some smiled at the sweet gesture. Others whispered among themselves. Adunni felt her face burn with shame. "Who are these people?" her manager, Mr. Williams, asked curiously. Before Adunni could think, before she could breathe, the words came tumbling out. "I don't know them. They must be confused." "Security." The smile died on Mama Shade's face. Baba Tund stood frozen, unable to believe what he'd just heard. "Adunni," Mama Shade whispered, her voice breaking. "It's me, your mother." "I said I don't know you," Adunni shouted, her voice rising with panic and rage. "Get out. You beggars are always coming here to disturb our guests." Security guards approached. Baba Tund raised his hand to stop them, his dignity intact even in this moment of deepest hurt. "We are leaving," he said quietly. But Mama Shade couldn't move. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at her daughter, the child she had carried for 9 months, the baby she had nursed through malaria and pneumonia, the girl whose school fees they had paid with every kobo they earned. "Adunni," she said, her voice trembling. "Have we sinned against you so much? What have we done to deserve this shame?" Something snapped inside Adunni then. All her years of buried resentment, all her shame, all her anger at being born poor came pouring out like poison. "What have you done?" she screamed. "You gave birth to me in poverty. You condemned me to this life of struggle. You are nothing but wretched, useless people who should have never become parents." The entire lobby went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Adunni wasn't finished. She stepped from behind the reception desk, her finger pointing at her parents like a weapon. Her voice grew louder, more venomous. "I curse the day I was born to you. I curse your poverty. I curse your miserable existence. May you never know peace for bringing me into this world to suffer. May you." Adunni, stop. Baba Tun's voice thundered through the lobby, but it was too late. The words were already out. The curse was already spoken. And in the Yoruba tradition, curses spoken by a child against their parents do not fall on deaf ears. The ancestors are always listening, and they always answer. Mama Shade collapsed to the floor, the basket of food spilling across the polished marble. Baba Tund caught his wife, his own tears finally falling. He looked up at his daughter, and for the first time in her life, Adunni saw something other than love in her father's eyes. She saw pity. "You don't know what you've just done," he said softly. "May God have mercy on you, because the ancestors will not." They left the hotel, Baba Tund supporting his weeping wife. The basket of food remained on the floor, the soup seeping into the cracks between the marble tiles. Adunni stood there, breathing hard, her heart pounding. Her co-workers stared at her with shock and disgust. Mr. Williams shook his head slowly. "Clean this up," he said coldly. "And Adunni, we need to talk about your behavior." But Adunni barely heard him. She was looking at the spilled food, at the pounded yam her mother had spent hours preparing, at the soup that was her favorite since childhood. For just a moment, she felt something crack inside her chest. For just a moment, she wanted to run after them, to fall at their feet and beg forgiveness. But her pride was too strong. Her shame was too deep. She turned away and went back to her desk. She didn't know that her life, as she knew it, was already over. The ancestors had heard every word, and they were already preparing their answer. The first sign came that same night. Adunni returned to her apartment in Bodija, still angry, still convinced she had done the right thing. She took a long shower, washed away the memory of her parents' faces, and ordered Chinese food from her favorite restaurant. When she looked at her phone, she had 47 missed calls, all from her parents' neighbor, Mama Saad. Adunni's hand trembled as she dialed back. "Adunni, where have you been?" Mama Saada's voice was frantic. "Your mother collapsed when they got home. We've taken her to the hospital. Your father said you must come now." "Which hospital?" Adunni asked, her voice small. "Yuk. Please hurry." Adunni grabbed her bag and ran out. But when she got to the street, her car wouldn't start. The engine was completely dead, even though it had been fine that morning. She called an Uber, but 3 drivers canceled on her. Finally, the 4th driver agreed, but they hit traffic like Adunni had never experienced. What should have been a 20-minute drive took 2 hours. By the time she reached University College Hospital, it was past midnight. She found her father in the corridor, sitting on a wooden bench, his head in his hands. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a few hours. "Baba," Adunni called softly. He looked up at her, and his eyes were empty. "She's inside. Room 7. The doctor says her blood pressure shot up to dangerous levels. Her heart is weak. They are trying to stabilize her." Adunni wanted to go in, but her feet wouldn't move. "Will she be okay?" Baba Tund was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "You cursed us today, Adunni. You cursed the people who gave you life. Do you know what that means in our tradition?" "Baba, I was angry. I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." He cut her off, his voice quiet but firm. "You meant every word. I saw it in your eyes. You have been ashamed of us for years. Today, you finally said what was in your heart." "I'm sorry," Adunni whispered, tears starting to fall. "Sorry." Baba Tund looked at her with those pitying eyes again. "Sorry cannot call back a curse, my daughter. Sorry cannot unhear words that the ancestors have already recorded. You will understand soon. The consequences have already begun." As if to confirm his words, Adunni's phone rang. It was Mr. Williams, her manager. "Adunni, don't bother coming to work on Monday," he said, his tone cold and professional. "A video of what happened today has gone viral. The hotel's reputation is being affected. We have to let you go. Human Resources will send your termination letter by email." The call ended. Adunni stared at her phone in shock. "Video? What video?" Baba Tund shook his head. "One of the guests recorded everything. It's all over social media. Your name, your face, your words. Thousands of people have watched you curse your parents. Adunni's hands shook as she opened Facebook. There it was. The video. It had been shared 12,000 times. The comments were brutal. This girl is wicked. How can someone do this to their own parents? She will suffer for this. Karma is real. The ancestors will deal with her. Her Instagram was flooded with hateful messages. Her phone number, somehow leaked, was receiving threatening calls. Her whole life was being torn apart online by thousands of strangers who had watched her worst moment. Adunni felt the room spinning. She sat down hard on the bench, next to her father. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. "You broke the oldest law," Baba Tund said quietly. "You dishonored your parents. You cursed the ones who gave you life. Now you will learn what you should have been taught long ago. Humility, gratitude, and the weight of consequences." Over the next 3 days, Adunni watched her life crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. Her landlord called. The viral video had reached him too. He wanted her out of his property. "I don't want tenants who treat their parents like garbage," he said. "You have 1 week to pack your things." Her friends stopped answering her calls. They deleted her from group chats, unfollowed her on social media, acted like she had never existed. No one wanted to be associated with that girl who cursed her parents. The hotel job was gone. She applied to 15 other places. All of them rejected her the moment they Googled her name. Her credit cards were maxed out. The designer bags and clothes she'd bought to maintain her fake lifestyle had buried her in debt. With no job, the collection agencies started calling. Everything was falling apart. And Mama Shade remained in the hospital, hovering between life and death. On the 7th day, as Adunni packed her belongings into boxes, she found an old photo album she'd hidden at the back of her closet. She opened it and saw pictures of her childhood. Her parents smiling, young and hopeful. Little Adunni in her school uniform, holding her father's hand. Her mother braiding her hair on a sunny afternoon. In every picture, they were poor. But in every picture, they were happy. Adunni's tears fell onto the old photographs, smudging the already faded images. What had she done? That night, she had a dream. She was standing in a vast, empty space filled with mist. 7 elderly figures sat in a circle, their faces obscured by shadows. They wore traditional Adbata robes that seemed to be made of starlight and smoke. Adunni, daughter of Tund. One of them spoke, the voice ancient and heavy with power. "You have called upon the ancestors with your curse. You have rejected your bloodline. You have spat upon the sacrifices of those who came before. Now you will understand the price of your pride. Please." Adunni fell to her knees. "I didn't mean it. I was foolish. I was wrong." "Were you?" another voice asked. "Or did you speak your true heart? We do not punish for mistakes, child. We answer what is truly within. Your shame has been eating at you for years. Your resentment has been growing like a poison tree. Today we simply hold up the mirror. What you see is what you planted." "What do I do?" Adunni sobbed. "How do I fix this?" "Can a tree grow its roots before it has fallen?" A third voice asked. "You must descend before you can rise. You must lose everything before you can understand what truly matters. This is not punishment, daughter of Tund. This is education." The dream faded, and Adunni woke up drenched in sweat. 3 days later, she stood outside her old apartment with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. All her friends had abandoned her. She had no money, no job, no home. She had only one place left to turn. The place she had spent her whole life trying to escape. The rain was falling hard when Adunni arrived at her parents' compound in Okadu. The narrow street was muddy, with open gutters overflowing. Children played in the rain, their laughter echoing through the evening. The zinc roofs rattled with every gust of wind. This was the place Adunni had sworn she'd never return to. Now it was her only refuge. She knocked on the familiar wooden door, her 2 suitcases heavy in her hands. Baba Tund opened it. He looked exhausted. Older. Broken. "Adunni," he said simply. "Baba, her voice cracked. "I have nowhere else to go. Can I stay here? Just for a little while." He stepped aside without a word. The single room looked smaller than she remembered. One mattress on the floor where her parents slept. A small kerosene stove in the corner. A wooden table with 2 chairs. A cupboard that held all their worldly possessions. The walls were still stained. The roof still leaked into a bucket in the corner. This was what her parents had. This was what they had lived with while spending everything on her. "Your mother is still in the hospital," Baba Tun said, sitting down heavily on one of the chairs. "The doctor says she's stable now, but she needs medication. Expensive medication. I've sold my frying pan and some of our things to pay for what I could, but..." His voice trailed off. Adunni looked at her father, really looked at him, for perhaps the first time in years. His hands were rough and scarred from years of working over hot coals. His face was lined with worry and exhaustion. His clothes were faded and patched. This man had given everything for her, and she had repaid him with curses. "I'll get a job," she said. "I'll help pay for Mama's medication." Baba Tun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what face will you find work now, Adunni? Your name is known everywhere. Your shame is public. The ancestors are not done teaching you yet." He was right. For 2 weeks, Adunni searched for work. Any work. She applied to restaurants, shops, cleaning services, anywhere that might hire her. But the video had spread too far. Everyone knew her face. Everyone knew what she'd done. "We can't hire someone like you," one restaurant manager said. "What kind of person curses their own parents? You would bring bad luck to our business," a shop owner told her. "The ancestors would be angry with us for helping you." Doors closed in her face. People spat at her feet. Some called her Omoale, bastard child. Others made signs to ward off evil when they saw her coming. She had become an outcast in her own city. With no money coming in, Adunni had to face a reality she'd never imagined. She had to go to Dugby Market with her father and help him sell roasted plantains. The first day was agony. She stood behind the small wooden table her father had rebuilt after selling his better equipment. Her hands, once soft and manicured, now turned plantains over the charcoal fire. The smoke stung her eyes and made her cough. The heat was unbearable. Her back ached from standing. Her feet swelled in the cheap slippers she now had to wear. And the people recognized her. Is this not the girl from the video?" one woman said loudly to her friend. "The one who cursed her parents?" "Kai. She has fallen, oh," another replied. "See how the mighty have fallen." Some people deliberately walked past without buying. Others bought from competitors just to spite her. A few stopped to lecture her about respect and tradition. One old man even prayed loudly that the ancestors would continue teaching her until she learned. Every word was a knife. Every stare was a judgment. But slowly, painfully, Adunni began to understand something. This wasn't just punishment. This was perspective. She saw how hard her father worked, sweating under the hot sun from dawn till dusk. She felt exhaustion in her bones after just one day of what he'd been doing for decades. She understood the dignity he maintained even when people looked down on him, even when society treated him as invisible. She saw the other market vendors, Mama Kike who sold vegetables, Baba Whale who repaired shoes, Auntie Peju who sold oranges. They were all hardworking, honest people trying to survive. They weren't shameful. They were strong. They were the backbone of the community. How had she ever been ashamed of this? One evening, after a particularly brutal day at the market where she'd made only 800 naira, Adunni broke down. She sat on the floor of her parents' room and cried until she had no tears left. "I'm so sorry, Baba," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was blind. I was wicked. I don't know how you can even look at me." Baba Tund was preparing to visit Mama Shade at the hospital with the little money they'd made. He paused and looked at his daughter. "Adunni," he said gently, "do you know why I still let you stay here? Why I haven't turned you away?" She shook her head. "Because you are my daughter. No matter what you've done, no matter what you've said, that blood cannot be broken. Your mother and I, we loved you from the day you were born. We loved you when you were ashamed of us. We loved you when you cursed us. We love you even now, as you suffer.
How?
Adunni whispered. How can you love someone who treated you so badly? Because that is what parents do, Baba Tun said. We don't love our children because they are perfect. We love them because they are ours. The ancestors are teaching you, yes, but they're also giving you a chance that many people never get. A chance to understand. A chance to change. A chance to become who you were always meant to be. His words broke something open inside Adunni. Not her pride this time. Something deeper. Something that had been locked away for years. Her heart. That night, she had another dream. The 7 ancestors appeared again, but this time the mist was clearing. She could see their faces more clearly now. They didn't look angry. They looked sad. Do you understand now, daughter of Tund? One asked. I think I'm beginning to, Adunni replied. I thought poverty was shameful. I thought my parents' struggles meant they were failures. But I was wrong. They are the strongest people I've ever known. And what have you learned about yourself? Adunni took a deep breath. I learned that I was a coward. I was so afraid of being poor, so afraid of being looked down on, that I became the very thing I feared most. I became someone with no value. Not because I had no money, but because I had no character. The ancestors nodded slowly. Your mother grows weaker, one of them said. The medicine she needs is expensive. The path before you is still difficult. But the worst of your education is nearly complete. What comes next depends on what you do with what you've learned. Tell me what to do, Adunni begged. I'll do anything to make this right. You cannot make it right, an ancestor said. Some things, once broken, cannot be fully repaired, but they can be rebuilt, differently, stronger, if you have the courage. When Adunni woke up, the first light of dawn was seeping through the cracks in the zinc roof. She heard her father stirring, getting ready for another day at the market. She stood up, folded her sleeping mat, and went to help him prepare. Something had shifted inside her. The shame was still there, but it had transformed. It was no longer shame about her parents' poverty. It was shame about who she had been. And shame about who she had been could become fuel for who she would become. 3 months passed. 3 months of waking up at 4 a.m. 3 months of roasting plantains and selling them for small coins. 3 months of public ridicule and private tears. 3 months of watching her father count every naira to pay for her mother's medication. But 3 months of something else too. 3 months of neighbors who had cursed her name beginning to nod at her in the mornings. 3 months of learning the names of the other market vendors and hearing their stories. 3 months of building something she'd never had before. Genuine relationships based on truth, not lies about who her parents were. You're different now, Mama Kike, the vegetable seller, told her one day. When you first came here, your eyes were full of anger. Now they're full of something else. What? Adunni asked. Understanding, Mama Kike said. That's what suffering gives us, if we let it. Understanding. But Mama's shade was getting worse. The medication was slowing the decline, but it wasn't enough. She needed surgery. Surgery that cost 500,000 naira. An impossible amount for a family that struggled to make 2,000 naira a day. Baba Tund never complained. He just worked harder, saved every kobo, and prayed. And Adunni, watching her father's silent suffering, made a decision. She would find a way. Somehow. The ancestors had brought her low. Now she would have to prove she'd learned the lesson. The idea came to Adunni in the middle of the night. She had been lying awake, listening to the rain hammer against the zinc roof, thinking about everything that had happened. The viral video, her fall from grace, the months of suffering, her mother dying slowly in the hospital because they couldn't afford proper treatment. And then she remembered something. Her phone. She still had her smartphone, one of the last possessions she hadn't sold. She'd kept it because it was how she searched for jobs, how her father contacted her when he needed help at the market. But now, staring at it in the darkness, she realized it could be something else. A tool for redemption. The next morning, she didn't go to the market with her father. Instead, she spent hours typing on her phone. Her hands shook as she wrote, tears blurring her vision. But she didn't stop. She wrote everything. The whole truth. She wrote about being ashamed of her parents. She wrote about the lies she'd told her friends. She wrote about the curse she'd spoken in that hotel lobby. She wrote about losing everything, her job, her home, her friends, her dignity. But she also wrote about what came after. The lessons she'd learned. The market where she now worked. The love her father had shown her even after everything. The strength her mother had demonstrated even from a hospital bed. The other vendors who had slowly accepted her back into the community. She wrote about privilege and poverty, about shame and humility, about the difference between wealth and worth. When she was done, she had written 2,000 words. A confession. An apology. A testimony. She posted it on Facebook with a simple title. I am the girl who cursed her parents. This is what I've learned. Then she set her phone down and went to help her father at the market, not expecting anything to come of it. But the ancestors work in mysterious ways. By that evening, her post had been shared 5,000 times. By the next morning, 50,000 times. News websites picked it up. Radio stations read excerpts on air. Television morning shows discussed it. Within 3 days, it had been shared over 200,000 times. But this time, the response was different. This girl has learned her lesson. It takes courage to admit you were wrong like this. Her parents raised her right. She just had to learn the hard way. I was angry at her before, but this has touched my heart. More importantly, people started donating. Someone set up a GoFundMe for Mama Shade's surgery. Nigerians abroad sent dollars. People in Lagos brought cash to the market. Within 1 week, they had raised 400,000 naira. Within 2 weeks, they had the full 500,000 naira needed for the surgery. Adunni couldn't believe it. She sat in the hospital corridor, looking at the numbers on her phone, tears streaming down her face. You see? Baba Tund said quietly beside her. When you are honest, when you are humble, when you show people your true heart, not the fake version you tried to sell them before, but your real heart with all its cracks and scars, they respond to that truth. But why? Adunni asked. After everything I did, why would people help me? Because everyone makes mistakes, Adunni. Everyone has moments they're ashamed of. They see themselves in your story. They see a chance for redemption. Not just yours. Their own. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. That Sunday night, Adunni sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand. Mama Shade was weak, but her eyes were open. It was the first time they'd really spoken since that terrible day at the hotel. Mama, Adunni whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Mama Shade squeezed her hand weakly. My daughter, she said, her voice barely audible. I forgave you the moment the words left your mouth. That's what mothers do. How can you forgive something like that? Because I know something you forgot, Adunni. I know that hurt people. You were not evil. You were in pain. Pain from always feeling less than others. Pain from growing up poor in a world that worships wealth. That pain turned into shame, and shame turned into anger, and anger turned into those words. But the words were still unforgivable. No words are unforgivable if the heart truly changes. Mama Shade coughed, and Adunni helped her sip water. Do you know what I prayed for when I collapsed that day? What? I prayed that the ancestors would not be too hard on you. I prayed that they would teach you, yes, but also that they would preserve your spirit. Because I saw something in your eyes that day, even through all that anger. I saw my daughter, drowning, reaching out the only way she knew how. Adunni's tears fell onto their joined hands. The ancestors showed me dreams. They told me I had to descend before I could rise. They were right. I had to lose everything to understand what really mattered. And what matters, my daughter? Love, family, truth, dignity in honest work, gratitude for sacrifices made, the strength to face shame and transform it into something better. Adunni looked at her mother's face, lined with years of struggle and unconditional love. You and Baba are the richest people I know. I just couldn't see it before. Mama Shade smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek. Now you see with clear eyes. Now you are ready for what comes next. The surgery was successful. Within 2 weeks, Mama Shade was out of the hospital. She was weak but alive. Healing. The viral video of Adunni's confession had an unexpected result. A woman named Mrs. Okonkwo, who owned a chain of restaurants, reached out to her. I was moved by your story, Mrs. Okonkwo said when they met. I want to offer you a job. Not because I pity you, but because someone who can face their mistakes like you did, someone who can humble themselves like that, that's someone with character. And character matters more than a perfect resume. Adunni started as a waitress, the lowest position. She didn't mind. She served customers with genuine kindness, learning from each interaction. She arrived early and stayed late. She treated everyone with respect, from the dishwashers to the managers. Within 6 months, she was promoted to supervisor. Within a year, assistant manager. But more importantly, something else had changed. Every Sunday, without fail, Adunni went to Okadu. Not to drop off money and leave, but to spend the whole day with her parents. She helped her mother cook. She sat with her father and listened to stories about his childhood. She learned about her grandparents and great-grandparents, about the family line that had survived colonialism, civil war, poverty, and every hardship imaginable. She started a blog called Lessons from the Ancestors, where she wrote about traditional values, about honoring your parents, about finding wealth in things that couldn't be counted in naira and kobo. Thousands of young Nigerians followed her. Many of them shared their own stories of being ashamed of their parents, of learning the hard way, of finding their way back to their roots. 2 years after that terrible day in the hotel, Adunni stood at Dugby Market again. But this time, she wasn't selling plantains. She was launching a foundation called The Humble Seed to help children of market traders get education without losing connection to their parents' struggles. Baba Tund and Mama Shade stood beside her, dressed in beautiful traditional attire that Adunni had bought for them. They looked like royalty, because that's what they were. Not because of money or status, but because of the love and wisdom they had carried through the hardest years. As Adunni gave her speech to the gathered crowd, she saw them, the 7 ancestors from her dreams, standing at the edge of the market, visible only to her. They nodded slowly, their ancient faces peaceful. The lesson was complete. That night, Adunni had one final dream. She stood before the ancestors again, but this time she wasn't kneeling in shame. She stood tall, with dignity earned through suffering and transformation. Daughter of Tund, the eldest ancestor spoke. When you cursed your parents, you called upon us. We answered. But we did not answer with the curse you expected. We answered with the curse you needed. The curse of truth. The curse of consequence. The curse of education. I understand now, Adunni said. The curse wasn't the punishment. The curse was the opportunity to see clearly. Every curse is a mirror, another ancestor said. It reflects what already lives in the heart. We simply made visible what was hidden. We made external what was internal. And in doing so, we gave you the chance to face it, to fight it, to transform it. Are we okay now? Adunni asked. My parents and am I forgiven? The ancestors smiled. You were always forgiven by them. The question is, have you forgiven yourself? Adunni thought about that, about the girl she used to be, so full of shame and anger, about the woman she was becoming, still imperfect, but trying every day to be better. I'm working on it, she said honestly. That is all anyone can do, the eldest ancestor said. Remember this, Adunni. Remember it when you have children of your own. Remember it when you face new challenges. Remember it when you see others making the mistakes you once made. The ancestors are always watching, always listening, always teaching. But we are not cruel. We are not vindictive. We are simply reflections of truth. And truth, though painful, is the only thing that sets us free. The dream faded. Adunni woke up to sunlight streaming through the window of her small but comfortable apartment. She could hear her phone buzzing with messages from followers on her blog, from young people asking for advice, from media wanting to interview her. But before she checked any of that, she sent a text message to her parents. "Good morning, Baba and Mama. Thank you for never giving up on me. I love you." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "We love you too, our daughter. We always have. We always will." Adunni smiled, got out of bed, and prepared for another day. She had learned the hardest lesson life could teach. She had been cursed by her own words and saved by her own transformation. She had descended to the lowest point and risen again, not to where she was before, but to somewhere better, somewhere true. The ancestors had answered her curse. But their answer wasn't destruction. Their answer was education. Their answer was love. And in the end, that made all the difference. 5 years later, Adunni stood in the newly built community center in Okadu, a project funded by her foundation. Her parents sat in the front row, healthy and smiling. Around them sat dozens of market traders and their children. On the wall hung a plaque with words in both English and Yoruba. Enit obadi obiri emola na anayuasaib. Those who disrespect their parents will find themselves in the same position. Beneath it, another quote. But those who learn from their mistakes, who humble themselves, who seek truth over comfort, they will rise higher than they ever imagined. Not because they never fell, but because they learned to fly after hitting the ground. As Adunni looked out at the faces watching her, young and old, rich and poor, all gathered to hear her story, she felt the presence of the ancestors one last time. Not in a dream, not in a vision, but in the warm weight of truth that settled around her shoulders like a blessing. She had been the spoiled daughter who cursed her parents. Now she was the humble woman who honored them. And in that transformation lay the greatest lesson of all.